So, hi everybody, this is Amelia Vogler, specialist in energy medicine, and your host for the Energy Magazine exclusive interview series. And today, our special guest is Susan Wagner. Susan is a veterinary neurologist whose pioneering work acknowledges the spiritual interaction between humans and animals. And Dr. Wagner is an active public speaker in the area of energy theory, healing, and spirituality. She is a Healing Touch for Animals practitioner, and founder of the Equine Assisted Awareness and an energy-based equine therapy for humans. And Dr. Wagner has also co-authored the Through a Dog's Ear, Using Sound to Improve the Health and Behavior of Your Canine Companion. So Susan, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's one of these really golden opportunities for me to talk with somebody who can speak to the science of energy healing. I remember reading in your article that you also had that curiosity coming into this discipline going, but how does it work?
Yeah.
How does it work? And, I think we'll also talk some about your love of animals and humans and the connection between those. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know your work and getting to hear from you. So to kick us off, I didn't wear, my 4-year-old outfit today, but for this first question, I'd like to pretend that I'm really young and, have just like a really young brain. And so when many people talk about energy medicine and theories about quantum mechanics or quantum physics, my experience is that many of us in the field, we kind of get it. We can kind of go, yeah, this story makes sense. Yeah. And we kind of feel comfortable with it, but yet I think that we're also needing or wanting, the 4-year-old story. Like, how do you talk about these things like as if we were little? So I would just love to hear you share a little bit about your understanding of what's beneath the scientific basis of energy medicine, as if I had my 4-year-old brain in.
That's perfect because that's the way I had to understand it. I'm not a physicist. I'm not an engineer like you. And still I knew when I first experienced it that it worked, number one. And then, yes, my curiosity was just rampant about how does this work? Because it is very controversial in some circles because people, they don't understand it. So I set out to try to understand it from a very, very simple perspective. And what I found out through reading and lectures and things like that is that it is actually very simple. Everything in our bodies and plants and the earth and the animals, everything is vibrating, meaning it has a wave to it. And not like an ocean wave, although if you think of an ocean wave, right, it goes in and comes back out. But this is a wave, so if you could draw a line where my finger is going, that's a wave. It goes up and it goes down. And so in science class, even in elementary school, we learn that our bodies are made of these particles, these atoms. And what science has now taught us is that those tiny, tiny little particles that make us up are really nothing more than bursts of this energy, which is a wave. So it's a power, it's a wave. And you think about it, this is the easiest way I think, is think about it as throwing a pebble in a pond, right? We throw that, we try to skim that rock out there, and then it lands, and what happens? You see these waves, these ripples come out from it. So think of your body exactly like that. So your body is the pebble, the stone, and then it's sending off these ripples. Now we can't like the pond, you can't see them, but you can feel them because they're invisible to our eyes. So they come out. And the most fun part about it is that pebble, now I want you to think of it like throwing an ice cube into a pond, because ice is made of water and the pond is made of water. So now the ice is a solid form of that water. And that's really what we are. We're the same water as the pond, but it's just in solid form versus the waves. And this sounds real crazy, but oh no, it's very much supported by research. And you know, the other thing I tell folks, maybe the 4-year-old, but once you get further on in life, although come to think of it, the 4-year-olds are probably best at this. If we think about it, what do we say when we walk into a room and there's been an argument or difficult meeting, or that 4-year-old's walked in and the parents are having a discussion? What do we say? The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. We say that all the time. How do you feel somebody else's tension if you're not touching them? What are we feeling? Well, you're feeling the ripples in that pond coming out from the people who were having the discussion that was maybe a bit discordant, but angry. And you feel that. And little kids feel it, we feel it. That's the energy coming off of our bodies. That's the pond.
That's okay. What a great explanation. Now, when the scientists start talking about light is both a particle and a wave. So we've got, there's 2 types of physics. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about, walking in the room with your parents having an argument, and we're in kind of like everyday reality here, and the apple could fall on their head. And there's also something else that could be happening there.
Right.
You could a little to the realities.
Right, exactly. So when I first started learning about this, I actually was not good at physics in college because it was all Newtonian physics, meaning Isaac Newton, the story is the apple hit him in the head, and he went, how did that happen? And then he ingeniously came up with a theory of gravity and acceleration and all those things. Those are called, named after him, Newtonian physics, which is the relationship of solid particles to each other. It's how they just launched the rocket up to the space center and got the astronauts back. That's all Newtonian physics. It's very exact. Well, then what happened is the scientists started learning more and more about these smaller things called molecules and atoms and this whole new small world. And everything is mathematics. The formulas have to fit. Life is math. For those of you who don't like math, sorry, life is math. And so these brilliant scientists started going, Einstein being one of them, going, wait a minute, this calculation would not match with this atomic structure. So how do we figure that out? And honestly, they still haven't merged the 2 disciplines, one being Newtonian physics and the other being quantum physics, because they started getting smaller and smaller. And one of the scientists named these bursts of energy as quanta. And so that's kind of what you're talking about, is this, this is where it really hit home for me. And it's called the duality of light and matter. And what that means is, at the very beginning, the scientists started looking at these waveforms, right? These bursts of energy, and they would put these light bursts of energy, because light is a wave, microwaves are a wave, radio waves are a wave, everything is a wave. And they would put it on these metal plates, and they would measure the particles, the electrons that would kick off of them. And it's sort of like if I don't know if they still have bumper cars. I'm old enough to remember bumper cars, where you get in the bumper car and you go up and you hit the next one, and then the next one. Supposedly, according to Newtonian physics, only bumper cars can hit another bumper car. But what these scientists were showing in Europe, Niels Bohr and his group, was that they could do these bursts of light and they were acting like a bumper car. The light was pushing off the next bumper car, the electron, and that shouldn't happen according to Newtonian physics. And it was a scientist who named those bursts of light quanta. And then later, this is where it really hit home for me, was in the 60s, a scientist was doing the opposite. So he was working on a project where he had a machine that only light waves could go through, and he would measure different things. And he decided to take a particle, an electron, and put it through the machine. Now, once again, according to Newtonian physics, according to the bumper car, it shouldn't work, right? Because a bumper car shouldn't go down a stream, where water and waves are flowing. And it did. And so now we see light waves acting like a bumper car, and bumper cars acting like light and wave. This is called the duality of matter and light. So basically everything is both. So, I always joke, it's like you have a German Shepherd, and all of a sudden he's meowing, he's running the house, he's scratching, he's acting like a cat. Is he a cat or is he a dog? Which one? Or is he both? So the bottom line is that we are both. And this has been very supported by science.
So, and we're both. And, some scientists say that this is pseudoscience. Have you heard that? Where everything is so tiny, it doesn't really make a difference.
Oh, wow. Well, gee, I find that fascinating. I would love to have them sit down with a theoretical physicist and look at the mathematics and say it's not real. Again, it comes down to the math. You can sit around and go, oh, yeah, this would be, if, bumper car would act like water and water would act like a bumper car. The bottom line is there are mathematical equations to fit these theories. And so when you take it down to that place of math, that's science to me. And when people tease me and say I do woo-woo things, I always say, well, if you explain Einstein's theory of relativity, then you know what I do. Now, I can't really explain it, but I get it, right? So I can't do the math of it, but I get that everything is this big soup of wave that coalesces into particles. So I just tell them, go read about the math of it, look at the mathematical equations, and if that's not scientific, I don't know what is.
I tend to agree with you. So, I'm visualizing this great field of waves, interacting waves, and I'm curious about the relationship between this great big sea of waves and your love of animals.
Oh, yeah. It's funny. Us older folks, I tell my students when we're doing these lectures, and I say, the older folks, I guarantee, ask them what is their story, because we came into this world through a story, something that happens to us. The younger generations, they don't necessarily have to have a story. I always kind of cringe when they go, oh, well, my mom or dad, and then I realize how old I am. But it's like, okay, yeah, your mom's an energy practitioner. That's great, but we all have a story, and so for me, if you had said when I was growing up that I was going to be a veterinarian, I would have laughed at you. There's no way. We didn't even have pets. I was not living. I loved animals, but not like the kid who was 5 going, I'm going to grow up and be a vet. And it wasn't until I went to college, I was actually a psychology major. Before there was psychoneuroimmunology, it was just physiologic psychology and neuroscience. And I just loved all that. And I started working with rats and mice and monkeys, just watching them with play behaviors. And I just fell in love with the animals. So then when it came time to just know what my path was, just that PhD in psychology didn't feel right. It felt too narrow. So even then I was becoming holistic and didn't know I was becoming holistic. So I thought about medical school or what to do. And I just remembered that love of the primates. And I talked with a friend of a friend who was a vet. It's like, you could go into primate behavior and research, and that was it. So I applied to medical or to veterinary school. It took me a little while to get in because I didn't know a cow from, I kind of knew a cow from a horse, but I was a city girl. So I had to learn all that stuff. And so then as my career kept going on, and then I did my neurology training and all of that. Right before my neurology training, I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia, fatigue, and that was where my journey began. So I was already working with animals. I was already a veterinarian, and I was getting very, very sick. So a friend of mine got me a gift certificate to cranial sacral therapy, which is touch, but has a lot of energy base to it. And it worked. And it's like, oh, I have to learn this. And that's how I ended up at Healing Touch for Animals. Mm-hmm. So then now fast forward many years later, and I kind of left melded the conventional world of neurology with more holistic things, getting more and more interested in energy medicine and herbs and things like that. And so I kind of made that leap and went out on my own and was doing house calls purely for Healing Touch for Animals. And one thing I will say, if you are a scientist, you're a good observer. That's the other thing they say, well, it's not scientific. And I'm very firm about this, that the foundation of science is observation. You can't even make a hypothesis to test it if you don't first see something, right? And I've had major discussions with people about some of these interactions, and very well-respected scientists in the veterinary world will go, well, that's just not in my realm of thought. I can't even look at that. I'm like, what kind of scientist are you? So anyway, I'm a pretty good observer. And what I started seeing was, I would be called in for a particular, whether it was a behavioral problem or a neuro issue. And as I was there time after time and working through things, I noticed that the animal was acting a lot like the human. Mm. And if you ask any veterinarian behind closed doors after a glass of wine, yeah, they will tell you, oh yeah, we see it all the time. And at first I was like, no, this is too weird. I've been working too hard. They said this would happen if I didn't slow down. But the animals, they wouldn't stop. So time and time and time again, I could see it. And then I came to realize they are a reflection of us. And so what started happening was I could tell what obstacles the human was working with through what was happening with their animals. Mm-hmm. So animals really, they are so much more than our pets. They are our teachers. They guide us. They come in to show us different things, sometimes to their own suffering. And it's the same with wildlife. You don't have to have a pet or be interested in having a pet. Just look at wildlife and what's happening on the planet. It's all a reflection of who humanity is. And I think it's because they come in and they sense our energy fields. And there's something I call the Tesla principle, which we can talk about in a minute, that once I got that piece of it, I could merge the two. So, so I would tell people the next time your cat pees on your carpet, instead of getting really angry and yelling at it, you might take a step back and a breath and go, okay, who am I allowing to piss on me? Mm-hmm. And I guarantee you it's somewhere, and there's nothing wrong. It's just life.
Yeah, I really, really believe in those entrainments and the mirroring. And this might sound a little wacky, but my father was very ill a few months ago, and he's dear to me. And my cat ended up with the same illness. And I think, it entrained. I was carrying it for my dad. Meatball decided she wanted to carry it from me. She's a big fat Manx cat. Just
I love Manx. Yeah. It is whether they're carrying it or reflecting it or And when you use the word entrainment, that's how a lot of these things work. So then, the next step when I was trying to understand energy was then how does energy medicine work? So I get that we're these big pebbles in a pond. I get all that. How does an energy practitioner work? How does those energies work with each other? And one of them is entrainment, the other is resonance. And these are things that if you're a musician, you understand, because again, sound is a wave. But it's very, when things resonate, it's what it sounds like. They're very similar. So two waves that are very similar resonate, they're alike. And then entrainment means they come into a synchronicity. And that's, to me, when I got that, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. The energy practitioner has an energy flowing through and it resonates and then entrains. And there's a wonderful YouTube video that's a lot of fun, the 30 or 32 synchronized metronomes. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have.
It's really fun. And I tell my students, I want you to go watch this, because you have all these metronomes and they're all going different amounts. And for people who aren't musicians, a metronome is a little pendulum that helps you keep time when you're learning your scales and all of that. So just tick tock like a clock. And they're all scattered. And within 3 minutes or so, they're all going together. And that's a perfect example that you can see of resonance. They're resonating because they're all the same length, and they start to entrain. And I just love that. I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, there's some great studies in heart math that show when you put two people on an EKG machine and it's measuring the heart beats, eventually the hearts will become entrained with each other. So, I do think the metronome example is so interesting because I don't really think of them as alive, like we are, and yet they still have, an energetic quality to them. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder too, just about you mentioned the Tesla principle. That was where I wanted to go next, to see if you could share some learning.
Yeah. So, I think, again, you look back at your story and how you're sort of destined to do all these things. I remember being very young in health class when they talked about how women that live together will start having their menstrual cycles together. And I just kept saying to the health teacher, but why? Why? Well, because. Why? And now, all these years later, I understand why. Because a biorhythm, like you said, heart math, if it's your heartbeat, if your brain waves, everything in our body can be measured electrically or electromagnetically. Because if you like electricity, where the force is moving, that creates a magnetic field. And the other heart math thing I really love is, and I do this with my students because I like to see look on their face, is two people 5 feet apart and the heart rate starts to go in synchronicity with their brain waves. Now they're not touching, and you have a printout, right? This isn't somebody making something up. You're looking at that printout and you just see their faces going, like, just understand it from wave theory. So, back up to being very young, my heritage is Serbian American, both sides. I always say I'm the purebred in the family. And, my father was very proud of our heritage, as am I. And the story goes is that somehow we were distantly related to Nikola Tesla, who, when I was young, nobody really knew who Tesla was. Now everybody knows, at least they know the car named after him. And so we thought it was blood. We're not sure. Some parts of the family are like, no, it's blood. Others are his sister married into my grandmother's family. But in old country Serbian terms, that melds your family. And in a way, it doesn't matter because he became close with my grandparents. He used to come and stay for weeks. My aunts that were much older than my father would tell me stories about him, that he loved cats and he dressed well, and he was very kind, and he would just hang out with my grandparents. And so my father made sure around the dining room table that we learned that he invented the radio and he did this, and I had it from the age of 4. So as I got interested in energy medicine, of course, I would read a lot of Tesla's work, because his whole work was with electromagnetic radiation, meaning energy, meaning the waves. And he was just brilliant with his inventions. And so one day I was reading his theory of magnetic resonance, because it's kind of a popular story with a little bit of drama, probably amplified, no pun intended. But so Tesla believed that if you put just an oscillating device, not a jackhammer, but this device on the structural beam of a building, that it would eventually resonate and then entrain with the natural vibration of the building. Because as an engineer, everything vibrates, it all has a vibration. And it would just keep working it, so that eventually he felt you could just crumble the building. It's very much like an opera singer shatters a crystal glass. Her frequency can get so high and so powerful that it starts, the crystal has a frequency and it can't handle it anymore, and poof. That's the way homeopathy works too, but that's another talk. So I thought about this, and then one day as I was mulling over this, again, I'm pretty good at observing, and I could see a pattern in my own life that just kept coming back and coming back. And, a lot of times we make choices that aren't the best, and we know it, and we rationalize, but this wasn't. I mean, it was really a situation looked one way, and then 6 or 9 months later, completely flipped. I'm like, I have lived this before. And then that light bulb went on. And I thought, if Tesla's oscillating device could do this for a building, why couldn't something stick to our energy fields, our live energy fields, and just keep coming back and coming back? And that is life. And once I started looking at it, like, oh my gosh, there it is. And that's, I think, what the animals are picking up on. So they're in our lives, they sense this oscillation, and then they reflect it back to us. And the cool thing about it is there's nothing wrong. It's an event that happens when we're a child. It's traumatic to whatever degree. I mean, it doesn't have to be horribly trauma, but something happens and it sticks, and it just keeps coming back. But the reason it sticks is because it's the exact opposite of who we really are. So a lot of times as we go through our spiritual path, we're trying to find out who we are, what our gifts are. And this is the opposite of our gifts. So sometimes you can see what you're not in order to see who you are. So in other words, the person who has an event that creates fear, so that keeps coming back, every year, every couple of years, something else shows up that creates fear. But the truth of them is really courage. And nobody teaches us this. And so when it comes back, what do? We get more fearful, we get angry, we're the victim, it's happening to us. Well, from energy standpoints, like pushing a kid on a swing, if you put more energy to it, it gets bigger. And so it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because we get more and more and more negative, and then our skyscraper tumbles, which is either an illness, midlife crisis, a professional crisis. Something happens. It can't withstand the energy anymore. So instead, we can look at it and go, all right, what would the opposite? How do I respond to this with courage, which makes it decrease? So each time it comes back, it's a little less, it's a little less, it's a little less. So that to me is what life is. That's the purpose of life, is to work these energies.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, and that's my first marriage,
There you go. Yeah.
I was like, oh, I attracted that for some reason, and then I was done with it. What a great explanation, Susan. Thank you for that. So,
well, thanks, Tesla. It was just like, this is very interesting.
Came on a little bit brighter. So I really appreciate that. you're sharing. So as we kind of find our way to the end of our time together, do you have any resources or any suggestions if people wanted to learn a little bit more about energy medicine or around the work with animals in this space?
Yeah, there's so much out there. I hear so many people say, well, there's no research around that, and I wrote in the article, and I always ask them, oh, so when was the last time you looked in the literature? These are usually academic types. And the answer is never.
Yeah.
So for the academic type, you go into the medical literature and you search these terms, and it's right there. There's a wonderful organization called the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, which is a bunch of great academic types and others, artists, and people who are very committed to researching and educating and empowering energy medicine. And so it's a wonderful organization. You don't have to be a geek to join it. It has wonderful things. And then, of course, there's all the wonderful books from all the energy practitioners that talk about how their particular way that they do things. If it's peace or that person's still challenging you, well, there's, it's all woo-woo. You can send them to the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. There's books, James Oshman wrote a great book years ago, Gerber's Vibrational Medicine. There's a compilation on the science of spirituality. So there are great books out there that they're really easy to understand, but help to put that science to it, along with those wonderful books that are great about teaching you how to do energy medicine. And there's something being birthed right now, which I'm really excited about. It's just literally in its infancy. And Dr. Alan Schoen, who is just talk about the pioneer for integrative medicine in the veterinary world way back when, he has kind of come up with a concept of, he calls it CALM, the Conscious Animal Lovers Movement. And so it's going to be really a program where people can take different courses, and it goes way beyond the human-animal bond. There's a lot of people doing human-animal bond stuff, which is great. This is on steroids. So we're going to talk about the energy of that bond. We're going to talk about neuroscience and quantum physics, and not just with your pets. Again, you don't have to have a pet, just with nature, all the earth, the animals, how we reflect. A lot of heart math will be part of that. So we see it as a program where people could take a couple different classes that they're interested in, or actually go through the whole program, become an ambassador, and then teach some of these concepts, because I really see it as a way of spiritual and personal development, but you're coming through the love of nature and animals. So I'm pretty excited about that. So it'll be coming in the next few months, I think.
So it's called Conscious Animal Lovers Movement.
Yes. And it's co-founded by Amanda Masters, who is founder of Awake TV. Mm-hmm. So if people want to learn like what's happening right now, Dr. Schoen actually has a show on Awake TV, and he just, if you're an animal lover, he does a lot of great things. But he talks about this movement. So you can go back and see his past episodes.
On Awake TV.
Awake TV, yep. Yeah.
His name again?
Yeah, Dr. Alan Schoen, okay. And then he works with Amanda Masters at Awake TV. So there's a lot of great stuff on Awake TV, but then his show specifically is really great. So that's going to be the place to watch all of this get birthed.
Wow. Well, Susan, thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning and sharing some of this fascinating science through the lens of, accessible story. We really need storytellers like you that can give us the science in an easy way. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's great to be here and talk with you, and I wish everybody good luck on their journey of having fun with energy. Life is energy and energy medicine.